right. So yeah, like I mentioned a little bit before, some people started coming in. We're going to talk about section 31, which is really going to be an introduction to time series. We're actually going to talk about time series today, and then on Thursday for our second part, what's it, section 32. And this will be really relevant to the project that's coming up. So I will tell you right now is that, as you guys probably already, hopefully you guys, well, maybe not hopefully, but like you guys might have already looked at the project a little bit. The project is completely focused on time series coming up. So make sure you really go through the sections 31 and 32. I think section 32 in particular is mostly focused on the modeling aspect of time series. So note that I think that's probably like, can be, quite honest, it kind of can bend your mind a little bit. I will be honest with you guys, I am not a expert in time series. I have not used it directly in my like professional setting in any way. You know, hopefully we can kind of go through this. I think for like, even though with those caveats and stuff like that going forward, there's still a lot for like, hopefully I'm still able to teach you guys something good. This is not the first time I'm going through it, but if you guys have questions, just know that I will answer the best of my ability. And I might say, you know, honestly, I don't know the answer to that. The good news is that if you do give me questions like that I don't know, I do know a couple of instructors who have used time series, so they can definitely kind of help out with that. So feel free to bring up those questions, especially as we get into office hours next week and everything. Sound cool? All right, and then I think everyone can see the Zoom chat too. I just wanted to share out the specific resource for time series since it's going to be so relevant to the project. And I'll just go ahead and share my screen. I'll start sharing my screen now. So let's see here. There we go. And then I'm always ready for you guys to move. I don't know why Zoom moves on my windows. Okay, so all right, so yeah, this is the repo specifically the folder time series. And note that there are 4 different notebooks in here. If you had recently forked it, just know that I have done some updates on here, some kind of cleaning and stuff like that. Nothing too big big information, but if you are missing it, or if you had forked it, like let's say a month ago, you might wanna do a poll, for example, to make sure that's all up to date and everything. But we'll mostly focus on the intro aspect of time series, and then we'll go into trends and stuff like that. And then next time on Thursday, we'll go into the different models going through, and then we'll kind of go from there. Okay, cool. Before I start, just kind of give me a thumbs up. Who has looked at section 31, the introduction to time series? Yeah, even if it's just like a quick look. Okay, see some thumbs up. Has anyone not opened it up at all yet? Like, doesn't even know what time series? Okay, that's perfectly fine. I see a couple hands going up, and that's good. That's what today is for too. All right, but thank you for sharing. All right, so let's go into intro. So let me go ahead and make this minimized. Ooh. Okay, so you can see we got quite a bit of stuff to go through, and we'll see how much we get through. Note that we don't get through everything today, including the time series trends. We'll just leave that for Thursday, right? So time series data, first I'll go ahead and import this since I'll use that later. So what is time series data? So time series data, you kind of have already seen some data that could be reasoned to be time series, but the important thing to remember about what makes data a time series, essentially it's that it's a progression of time. Its focus is the temporal aspect of that data. So when you're talking about things like seasons, or a classic one is like the stock market, you know, the stock market, a big focus is what are the trends as they're going through the days and like even minutes and stuff like that. So time series data, basically you think of like anything that is focused around the time being a major aspect. So one of the key features. Okay, so some examples. Anyone got an idea of what an example of a time series might be? What kind of data set?
Stock prices.
Stock prices, good, right? So that's the classic example at stock prices. Anything else that we can think of?
What's something like weather?
Yeah, weather would be a great one because weather obviously has some changes, right? I mean, look at just the temperature, right? The temperature is going to change throughout the year, no matter where you are. I don't think there's any place, I could be wrong. I mean, some places fluctuate less than others, but there's definitely a change in weather based on time, right? So that's a great example. Okay, so stock prices, temperature over the year, right? Atmospheric changes over the course of decades. Also, like businesses go through seasons. Sometimes sales and stuff will follow certain trends and stuff like that. And some are repetitious, some are will change over time. I think there's one in the curriculum that talks about passengers or flight, number of passengers on planes and stuff like that. And that does have a seasonal trend to it, meaning that, there's kind of some repetition, like there's certain parts of the year that are really popular during like, for flying. But they'll also see like a trend going upwards, that maybe over many years, you see there's more and more people flying and stuff like that, or maybe less and less people. But the point is that there's some kind of time aspect related to that. Okay, so we've seen things like this, even like the Zillow data set, or was it Zillow? No, the King County, right? The King County data set. It even had time in there. So you could even reason that maybe that was a time series set. We didn't think about it in that way for linear regression. We mostly, I think for the most part, most people kind of ignored or maybe modified the time aspect of that data set to incorporate into the linear regression model. But instead, we're going to make the time aspect, the temporal aspect, kind of like the I don't know, the main focus, if that's the best way, like the main feature. Okay. So loading in a time series is just like loading in any single bit of data. I'll show you what this data looks like. So this is, what is it? The min temperature. So this is actually taken from the curriculum, I believe. And you can see here basically is that we have the date and our daily minimum, and you can see here's the date. It's just the day itself. And then I believe this is like temperature, and maybe it's like in Celsius, maybe it's in Fahrenheit, probably Fahrenheit in this case, which kind of makes sense. But anyway, let's go ahead and load it in. So you load in the data just like you normally would. I just kind of show what this looks like. You can see here, we got the date here, the daily min. One aspect in here though, is that note that we read this as an object. And what are objects in Pandas? Like what should we kind of equate that to in Python?
String.
Strings, I'm good. And I think I saw a couple people mouth it too. So strings. And then of course we have our actual floats. So note that we could technically go off of this, but it's kind of nice. What is that Python and Pandas really has, because time series is going to be such a huge part and that's going to be the focus, we can actually modify this string to be a date time object. And this date time object allows us to basically manipulate it with the date a little bit easier, figure out like a month and the year and stuff like that. So note that this structure right here, basically we're saving that date column, right? That series. And we're going to convert Pandas, or using Pandas as to date time. So this is a function built into Pandas. Okay. And we're going to take that whole column, right? That whole series, and convert it over to a date time. Now note that we can actually specify this format in this way. And this is basically the way for it to pull out from the string of saying, okay, the string looks like this, and let's pull out the relevant parts. So for example, we're pulling out the day first, the month, and the year. There's also other aspects too. For example, you can look at things like if it was the day of the week or what time of the day and stuff like that. There's other parts. The way you would just basically look this up is a date time string format. So if you look this up, you'll see a whole bunch of options to say, okay, not just the day, but maybe there's something like the time, like the hour, or even the minute, the time zone, and all these things. You can pull all those relevant information. The nice thing too is that this is consistent. This kind of format is consistent amongst other programs. So if you were to use another tool that would pull the date, date time from some information from a string, you can use that same formatting string. So this is a very common string that you can pass along different programs or other people who are working on different projects and stuff like that, and they'd understand how to read this in too. So good thing to know. And then what we'll do here, we'll actually make the temporal data, since it's the temporal data, it's going to be the main focus. We're actually going to set this as the index. So right now, if you look at the index, right, just by default for reading in Pandas, is basically there isn't a specific thing. Basically, it's just the count of data. So this is index 0, index 1. We're going to make the date the actual index, the focus of it. It's not really going to change in the sense of how we can read the data, but by making that the index, it makes it, give it the more focus, and it makes it a little bit easier for us to like remember that this is a time series. Okay, so I go ahead and run this guy. And you can see now, when we run this, you can see now we actually have a date time. Note that it's kind of specific saying, oh, this looks like a date time now. And note that for Pandas, when we display these, what's it called? These data frames, right? The index will be lower down, essentially. Note that you can have multiple indexes too. You might have actually done this by accident a few times before, but note that it's kind of this signaling that this is the index, and note that that's why it's in bold. Okay, any questions? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why did import the day? Like, because you format as day, month, year,
Mm-hmm.
and then why it's year, month, day?
Yeah, so this is actually showing the date time, and it's just kind of like similar to the sense of trying to think of a good example of this, like true, false, or like, you know, something like a Boolean value. Boolean values can be represented by zeros and ones or true and false. Pandas is displaying the date time object. So this is actually a special type of object. And the way it displays it essentially is, I'm trying to remember it's ISO 186. It's a format basically where you have the year first, the month, and then the day separated with dashes. And then you might also have additionally, what's it called? Hours and minutes and seconds and milliseconds. I'm gonna look this up real quick because I can't remember what it's called. ISO 8601. So this is the format this will tendly come out and stuff like that. So you'll see this common going through. So just know that basically, even though this right here was really specifying how do you read, oops, let me scroll up, there we go. The string, how do we read this string as a date time? That's really what this is showing right here. And this part is just saying, oh, this is a date time object, but you can still pull out those specific parts. So what's nice is that we can actually go from this date time, which we'll probably see, is we can pull out the specific month, the specific year, or the specific day. So we'll see what this looks like next. Okay, good question. Any other questions before I move on? No, sound pretty good. Okay, this is hopefully relatively understandable in the sense of what we're doing. Essentially, we're converting to date time, setting the index, and then we're just displaying it. So going off of this, now that we made that the index, we can actually slice the time series off of this. So note that we can basically use 1990, right? And note that I'm passing as a string, but since this data frame, right, is using a date time object as its index, it basically knows like, oh, it's just talking about the year 1990. And so it'll actually pull everything for that 1990 onwards. So I believe in this case, that should be like 365 days, right? Right, that's, yeah, not in leap year. So it's 365 days. So you can see here going forward. And if I did something like, here, just do the whole thing. You can see it goes all the way down to December 31st, right? So you can see here is that you didn't have to specify saying, oh, if 1990 is within this first part, I can say, oh, 1990, and it understands, oh, that's the year, and it goes from there. Okay. So anyway, yeah, I don't know I have that part in there. Okay, cool. So that's how we can slice it very easily. Let's see here. Oh, so this is saying like, you know, why should we make the date as the index? Like emphasize, it's going to be the most important aspect of a time series. So it just makes it a little bit easier for us to like navigate through there versus treating it as just another column or another feature. It's like, it's the main feature, it's our index. Okay, cool. So that's reading in our time data. It's usually not too, like nothing unusual. I think probably the biggest part is likely this part right here, right? This is probably the newest thing of seeing how we make it date time. Okay, what's nice is that we can do a bunch of cool stuff with date time, like finding how many days between or how many years between or whatnot. Okay, so now comes into like the fun stuff, right? Our visualizing our data.